If you have ever wondered why, despite all your effort, your heart still feels empty, broken, or on the verge of emotional collapse, then this message is for you, because there is a truth that almost no one dares to face directly. You are trapped in an invisible war, not against others, but against yourself. It is an internal battle that is not fought with words, but with silences, with glances you avoid, with the weight of everything you have not healed and carry every day. That part of you that feels incomplete, that seeks love in places where there is only rejection, that gets hopeful with broken promises, that clings to bonds that no longer exist, is not broken, not lost, not sick. It is only asking to be seen, to be heard, to be embraced. And that part, according to Carl Jung, is the key to your deepest transformation. No matter how much you have worked on yourself, how much you have read, meditated, reflected, or even cried, if you have not had the courage to look directly at your shadow, you will keep stumbling over the same emptiness disguised as people, goals, routines. Because it is not the world that rejects you. It is your fragmented self that continues to emit the vibration of lack, need, and abandonment. And all of that has an emotional root that no one taught you to identify. The invisible wounds you carry since childhood, the very wounds that deeply condition how you love, how you speak, how you feel, and especially how you treat yourself. Jung said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making our darkness conscious. And that is where this journey begins. It is not a comfortable or pleasant path. It is not a journey of quick self-esteem or superficial affirmations. It is a descent into the very core of the pain you have been avoiding your whole life. And there, right where you are most afraid to look, there is a sacred energy waiting to be released. Because every tear you did not cry, every emotion you swallowed to avoid bothering others, every no you wanted to shout, but turned into a yes out of fear of being abandoned, all of that was stored in your body and today manifests in your vibration, your emotional field, in that constant feeling of dissatisfaction you cannot explain. That dissatisfaction is not weakness. It is your soul speaking to you. It is your inner child knocking from within, asking you to stop running outward and start returning home to yourself, to your center, to your truth. Because when you were a child, all you wanted was to be loved unconditionally. You didn't need it explained to you. You just felt it. But if you did not receive that unconditional love, if you were told you had to behave well to deserve it, that you had to be useful, perfect, strong, silent, then you began to build a false self, a mask, and since then, your emotional life became a performance. You smile when you are falling apart. You help when you are the one who needs help. You love even when the other does not love you. And why do you do this? Because you are desperately seeking the validation you did not get when you needed it most. Carl Jung understood that we all carry a shadow, and that shadow, far from being an enemy, is a container of everything we deny about ourselves. Not only the pain, but also the power. Because in that wounded child who keeps crying inside, there is also your greatest source of vital energy. But that energy is trapped, conditioned, and only releases when you have the courage to face what you fear most. Your need to be seen, to be loved, to be enough, not as you were taught to be, but as you truly are. And perhaps this is the most important moment of your life. Not because you are about to achieve something external, but because you are ready to remember what you forgot. That you are not defective, that you are not broken, that you don't have to chase love as if it were a prize, that you are love itself, but you have been so disconnected from your center, so trained to please, to carry other people's guilt, to do what others expect, that you forgot your essence. Your soul does not want revenge. It does not want demonstrations. It only wants truth, presence, calm, and above all, it wants you to return its power. That power is not in shouting to the world how strong you are. It is having the power to look at yourself in the mirror at your worst moment and not turn away. It is being able to embrace yourself when no one else does. It is holding your tears without shame, because you did not come into this life to convince anyone. You came to remember who you are. And for that, you need to stop running. You need to stop, listen, and look inward. Because as long as you keep searching outside for what only you can give yourself, you will keep living the same story over and over with a different face. People change, places change, but the emptiness remains the same. Because the emptiness is not in others, it is in your disconnection from yourself. Emotional awakening does not start with theories. It starts with exhaustion, with that moment when you can no longer keep pretending, when you can no longer bear your own masks, when you feel that something inside you is dying if you continue doing things the same way. That moment is not a crisis. It is a call, a portal, a crack through which the truth begins to seep in. And although it hurts, even though it seems like everything is falling apart, it is precisely in that chaos where healing is born. Because before you transform, and it is not a destructive break, it is a liberation from roles, expectations, and emotional burdens that were never yours. Do you know how many decisions you have made out of fear, out of abandonment, out of, if I don't do this, they won't love me anymore, more than you can imagine? Because when you carry an open wound, everything you do revolves around avoiding it being touched. But that avoidance is what keeps you a prisoner. The only way out is through. And that journey requires brutal honesty, emotional courage, and patience. Because healing is not forgetting what happened, it is remembering it without pain. It is integrating every broken part and saying, I see you, I accept you, you don't have to scream anymore. That is the beginning of true emotional power. Power that does not depend on what others think, that does not need to explain or justify itself. Power born from contact with your soul. And that contact only happens when you stop judging yourself, comparing yourself, demanding from yourself, and start treating yourself like you would treat someone you love deeply, not from demand, but from compassion, tenderness, and the deepest acceptance. Because inside you, there is a voice that has been waiting your whole life for you to say, you don't have to fight anymore. And when you do, when you finally do, everything begins to align because your vibration changes. And when your vibration changes, your relationships change, your decisions change, your energy changes. Not because you are doing more, but because you are finally being you. And that you, the true you, is not weak for feeling, but wise for daring to feel it all. But then comes the moment when you can no longer ignore it. You can no longer pretend you don't feel that knot in your chest every time you abandon yourself to please others. You can no longer fake that everything is fine when inside you are slowly fading away. And it is not weakness. On the contrary, it is clarity. A soul that has reached its limit of tolerance for self-deception. Because you can tell yourself many things. That everything is under control. That you don't need anyone. That this is fine. But your body doesn't lie. Your energy doesn't lie. Your gaze doesn't lie. There is a void so deep that neither distractions, achievements, nor temporary relationships can fill it. And that void is not a punishment. It is a call, a portal to something much greater. Your reintegration with who you really are. When Carl Jung spoke of individuation, he was referring to this exact process. Not becoming a perfect person, but becoming a whole being. Not whole in external terms, but whole in your inner world. Because only when you integrate every part of yourself the parts you love and the parts you are ashamed of, the parts you show and the parts you hide? Can you begin to walk with freedom, emotional dignity, and vibrational coherence? And that integration doesn't come from reading pretty phrases. It happens when you consciously choose to stop betraying yourself, when you decide, though your soul trembles, not to keep begging for love in places where there is nothing but lack disguised as promises. It's not easy. It's not easy because you are conditioned, because you grew up in an environment where maybe you learned that your value depended on what you gave, how useful you were, how well-behaved you were. And that learning, like a seed, grew inside you until it became an emotional programming that pushes you to always put yourself last, to prioritize others, even if that means betraying yourself, to hold on to relationships that drain you out of simple fear of being alone, to accept crumbs disguised as love because deep down you feel that's all you deserve. And that feeling is the root of the problem. Not your story, not your past, not what was done to you, but what you learned to believe about yourself. From all that, this belief, this wound, this invisible mold you carry tattooed on your psyche, that filters your decisions, makes you repeat patterns, sabotages your relationships, your dreams, your peace. But it doesn't do it to punish you. It does it because it's all it knows, because your subconscious mind operates from emotional habit. And if your emotional habit is abandonment, rejection, guilt, that is what you will attract again and again. Not because you deserve it, but because it is the only frequency you recognize as familiar. Because no matter how much your rational mind says, I want to be happy, your body says, I only feel safe in sadness because it's what I've always known. And here is where Jung was so deeply accurate, because he wasn't trying to heal you. He was trying to get you to see yourself, to face yourself, to embrace yourself, to accept yourself. Not with resignation, but with dignity. With that kind of radical acceptance that transforms into alchemy. Because when you stop fighting what you feel, when you stop hiding it, running away, blaming others, trying to make everything fit, then something magical happens. That emotion that seemed unbearable begins to lose strength. Not because it disappears, but because you stop feeding it with resistance, because you allow yourself to feel it. And in that act, which seems so small but is immense, you recover power. Real power, not the kind based on being right or proving something. Power that arises from the root, from the core of your being. Power that springs forth when you stop needing the world to validate you and start being enough for yourself. But to get there, you need to cross a bridge. The bridge of grief, of repressed tears, of frozen emotions, of anger you never expressed, of pain you swallowed over and over. Not to get stuck there, but to get through it. Because what isn't felt doesn't heal. What is avoided repeats. And you deserve much more than keep repeating the same cycle of pain with different masks. That's why this is not a theory. It's a living process. It's an internal revolution that begins with something seemingly simple, like looking yourself in the eyes in the mirror and telling yourself the truth. Not the truth someone told you, not the truth you learned, but the truth you feel. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if it hurts, even if it's uncomfortable. That is the door. And the hardest part about crossing it is that no one can do it for you. No one can tell you when. No one can mark the path. Because your soul already knows. Your soul already feels. And it is only waiting for you to accept it. To stop making noise. To stop distracting yourself. To sit with yourself and ask, what part of me am I still denying out of fear of being alone? And it's not about healing overnight. It's not about fixing yourself. You are not broken. What's broken is the emotional pact you made with yourself when you were little. The one where you convinced yourself you were not enough. And breaking that pact takes time, love, presence. But it also requires that you stop justifying the unjustifiable, that you stop maintaining relationships where there is no reciprocity, that you stop giving yourself to those who don't know how to support you. Because that's not love. It's repetition, it's programming, it's the shadow telling you, here is where you still don't choose yourself. When you start seeing yourself with honest eyes, you can't go back because something inside you wakes up and starts questioning everything. Why am I still in this place that extinguishes me? Why do I accept emotional crumbs? Why do I stay silent when I want to scream? Why am I so hard on myself and so forgiving of others? Those questions are not punishment. They are the voice of your awakening soul. And although at first they destabilize you, they are the beginning of a freedom that depends on nothing and no one. A vibrational freedom, a coherence born when your body, mind, and heart align on the same frequency, your truth. And that truth, no matter how painful it seems, is the only path to peace. Because it's not about being happy all the time, it's about being real, allowing yourself to feel everything. And in that authenticity, in that emotional nakedness, arises the deepest connection with yourself, the one that no longer depends on achievements, validation, or meeting expectations, the one that simply is because you no longer need anything to feel valuable, because you no longer carry other people's guilt, because you are no longer afraid to show your vulnerability, because you know that vulnerability does not make you weak. It makes you human, and above all, it makes you free. Before you keep listening, stop for a second. Breathe. If this message is touching your soul, if something inside you is stirring, even though you can't explain it, I invite you to leave a comment. Tell me which part of this process you are living, or simply write, I am coming back to myself. Your words can be a beacon for someone else. And if you feel this channel is guiding your path of awakening and healing, subscribing is a powerful way to support this space so more souls can find this light. Here, we don't just talk, we feel. And that is the real change. Sometimes when we start this journey of inner awakening, a part of us still hopes it will be quick, that it won't hurt so much, that with enough willpower and some practical steps we can leave the accumulated pain behind. But the soul doesn't work like that. The soul is not in a hurry and is not afraid to break you a little more if that means you finally look at yourself truly. Because there are wounds you have carried for so long that you don't even see them anymore. They have become part of your identity, your way of relating, your way of speaking to yourself. And that is where the deep work begins, not in what you do, but in how you perceive yourself. And as Jung said with bluntness and love, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will keep directing your life, and you will call it destiny. That means every time you accept less than you deserve, every time you abandon yourself for love, every time you tolerate the intolerable to avoid feeling rejected, you are not choosing that from your freedom. You are choosing it from an emotional programming that has you trapped. And as long as you don't see it, as long as you don't face it, it will keep repeating no matter how much you try to change. Because it's not just about changing what's external. It's about transforming your inner vibration, coming back to yourself from a place never conditioned by trauma. This process is violent with the old. It tears down structures, makes you lose people, forces you to let go of roles you held to survive. You can no longer be the savior. You can no longer always be the strong one. You can no longer pretend you don't need love, because you do. But not in just any way, not at any cost, no. If the price is losing yourself. And then, what once made you feel safe begins to crumble. The relationships where you only gave without receiving. The bonds where you stayed silent to keep the peace, the places where you couldn't breathe but stayed out of fear. All of that begins to fall apart, and it's terrifying, but it's also necessary. There is a point in this journey where the only thing left is your own voice. And that voice at first is faint, full of doubts, insecurities, wounds that still bleed. But if you stay with it, if you sit in silence and listen without judgment, something inside you begins to arrange itself, not from logic, but from the soul. Because for the first time you stop running, stop avoiding, stop looking outside for what only you can give yourself. And in that moment, something sacred happens. You start to belong to yourself. That is the moment when the shadow, as Jung called it, is no longer an enemy. It is your guide. Because it's the part of you that you avoided looking at. Your anger, your sadness, your need for control, your emotional dependence no longer dominates you. Now you can see it, embrace it, listen to it, and instead of acting from it, you choose to respond from a deeper center, from your consciousness, from your soul, from that spark of light that was always there, waiting for you to calm down enough to feel it. But to get there, you need to cross the dark night, not once, but many times, deeper and more revealing each time, because healing is not linear, it's not progressive, it's a spiral. You return to the same wounds from a different place. They no longer destroy you, but show you where you still lack love, where you still forget yourself. And that is not a setback, it's a gift. Because every time you fall, you get closer to your essence. Every time you face your fear, you recover a part of yourself you had exiled. And that integration, that reunion with yourself, is the true purpose of this life. People think healing is stopping feeling pain, but healing is learning to hold yourself within pain. It's learning to stay with yourself when everything shakes. It's not abandoning yourself, not blaming yourself, not demanding perfection. It's looking at yourself with the eyes of the soul and saying, "Here I am. I'm not leaving. I love you even in your worst version." And that is not just healing, that is real love, adult love, conscious love, love that depends on nothing, love that starts with you and then expands to the world. And when you get there, you notice it, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer react the same way. You no longer crumble over just anything. You no longer need someone to choose you to feel valuable. You no longer have to prove your love through sacrifices. Your energy changes, your vibration rises, and even if you don't say it out loud, the universe feels it, life feels it, and it begins to give that back to you. More conscious people, more aligned opportunities, healthier experiences. Not because you earned it, but because you finally became a space where that can flourish. This is not about spirituality as a concept. It's about returning to the center, about remembering that you are not your wounds. You are not your mistakes. You are not what others said about you. You are the consciousness that observes all of that. You are the force that remains alive even when everything seems to fall apart. You are the will to heal, to love, to let go. And that is sacred. That is what truly makes you free. So come back to yourself every day, every night, every time you feel lost. Come back with patience, with tenderness, with firmness. Don't let go of yourself. Don't betray yourself. Don't demand so much of yourself. You are doing the best you can with the tools you have. And if you can feel this, if you can cry with this, and something inside you vibrates as you listen to these words, then you are already coming back. You are already remembering. You are already healing. When you have already crossed so many layers of yourself, when you have cried in front of your own reflection without understanding why something you cannot name hurts so much, you begin to realize something profound. All this time, you are not fighting against the world. You are fighting to recover your soul. That part of you that you left behind in every experience where you were not seen, in every situation where your emotions were invalidated, in every corner where you loved others more than yourself. And now that you are beginning to remember yourself, you feel everything with a new intensity. Every word, every silence, every memory becomes a door that connects you to that you had forgotten. It's about becoming someone different. It's about undoing everything you are not, what you inherited without questioning, what you believed out of necessity, what you accepted out of fear, what you tolerated because you didn't know your worth. Because Jung said it clearly, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are. And that is not something you achieve in a day. It is a slow rebirth, sometimes almost imperceptible, but increasingly true. When you begin to belong to yourself, masks no longer serve you. They weigh you down, suffocate you, betray you. You can't keep pretending you don't care about what you do care about. You can't keep saying, "I'm fine," when you're broken inside. You can't keep laughing when what you want is to cry, because the soul no longer tolerates lies. It wants authenticity. It wants presence. It wants you to be truly with yourself, not to run away anymore, not to adapt out of fear of rejection, not to live according to what others expect. Because as long as you keep doing that, you won't be able to hear the most important voice of all, yours. And that voice at first is barely a whisper. It tells you things like, you deserve rest. You deserve love without pain. You are not being yourself, but you are so used to ignoring yourself, so conditioned to silence yourself, that you don't hear it. You cover it with work, with noise, with relationships where you lose yourself, until one day your body screams, life screams, anxiety overflows, sadness no longer hides. And there, in the middle of the chaos, you have no choice but to stop, to look, to feel. And even though it hurts, that is where your true healing begins. Because while everything outside was in order, you were disordered inside. And life, in its brutal wisdom, had to break you on the outside so you could rebuild yourself inside. Not like before, not as someone functional, but as someone real, whole, complete. With no need to fit in, no need to justify your emotions, no need to explain your light, just being you. That you who was always there, but whom you had to go find in the darkest depths of your soul. And that darkness, although we fear it, is our greatest ally. And he dedicated a large part of his life to studying what he called the shadow. That unconscious part where we store everything we were taught was unacceptable to show. Our anger, our desire, our vulnerability, our truth. And we cannot be whole if we do not integrate that shadow. We cannot shine from the soul if we have not embraced what we try to hide. Because light without shadow is an illusion, and love without truth is attachment. So yes, you will have to sit with your shadow, talk to it, listen to it, ask it what it needs. And you will have to do this without judgment, without shame, without fear. Because underneath all that repressed pain is a part of you that just wants to be loved. This process of returning to yourself is slow because the soul is not in a hurry. It knows the exact timing when each part of you is ready to awaken. You cannot force it, you cannot rush it, you can only allow it. And that requires a faith that is not in the mind, but in the body, in the heart, in that wisdom that cannot be explained, but supports you when everything else falls apart. And in that space where you are no longer denying yourself, where you are finally listening to yourself, you begin to find something sacred, peace, not an artificial peace, not a peace that depends on everything being fine outside. A peace born because you are no longer at war with yourself, because you are no longer trying to fit into a mold that isn't yours. because you are no longer chasing love as if you don't deserve it. You have stopped running, you have stopped begging, you have stopped fleeing, and in that stopping, in that grounding, in that embracing yourself, a miracle happens. You find yourself, and then your relationships change, not because you force them, but because your energy no longer sustains dynamics of manipulation, dependence, or abandonment. That vibrational field that used to scream, "I need love," now whispers, "I am love." And that changes everything, because you attract what you are, not what you say you want. And if you vibrate from a place of authenticity, what arrives will be equally authentic. Even if it is little, it will be real. Even if it is new, it will be nourishing. Even if it is uncertain, it will be free. And that is worth more than any story where your soul had to be dimmed to be loved. And there is something even deeper that begins to happen. Something Jung explained better than anyone. Your soul begins to find purpose. Not purpose in terms of external success, but purpose as internal alignment. You no longer do things for validation. You do them for resonance. You no longer choose from obligation. You choose from the soul. You no longer seek approval. You seek truth. And there, your life becomes medicine, art, and authentic expression of who you are. And yes, you will still be afraid. You will still feel insecure. You will still stumble. But the difference is you will no longer abandon yourself, no longer betray yourself to please others, no longer silence yourself to fit in, no longer forget yourself to hold on to anyone. Because you have lived it. You have walked through the fire. You have cried all your masks. You have felt what it was like to be disconnected from yourself, and there is no turning back. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unlearn what you have understood. You cannot unlove yourself now that you finally know your worth. So no, you are not fragile for feeling everything so intensely. You are not weak for wanting to heal. You are not strange for needing silence, depth, truth. You are a soul awakening, returning home, remembering that you did not come to this world just to survive, but to be fully with all that implies. And when you honor that, when you become loyal to yourself, when you choose truth, even if it hurts, something in the universe also aligns. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your perception is no longer fragmented. You are no longer seeing everything from lack, from the wound, from need. You are seeing from the soul, from the center, from the love that asks for no permission. And that is the greatest healing you can experience. Not changing who you are, but stopping hiding it. Not forcing what does not flow, but surrendering to what vibrates with you. Not seeking love, but recognizing that you are already its source. Because the soul does not scream, the soul whispers. And you are finally learning to listen. Sometimes the soul does not speak in words. It speaks in voids, in silences that hurt, in spaces where something is missing and you don't exactly know what. And the most disconcerting thing is that from the outside, everything may seem in order. Stable job, functional relationships, set routines, and yet something inside feels turned off. As if your life were being lived by someone else. As if you, the true you, were waiting behind the curtain with trembling hands and your heart in your throat, waiting for your moment to step onto the stage. But the script never changes. The play goes on without you. That is the soul knocking on the door, not to ask you to do more, but for you to finally stop, to stop acting, performing, pretending, and start remembering. Because remembering who you are is not an event, it's a process. It's a slow and painful unprogramming. It's telling God goodbye to all the versions of yourself that you created to survive. Looking back and realizing that your need to be loved led you many times to not be yourself, to repress your truth, to postpone your joy, to sacrifice your essence to fit molds that never truly belong to you. And there comes the real question. Are you willing to let go of the idea of who you thought you should be to become who you really are? Jung expressed it clearly. What you deny enslaves you. What you accept transforms you. And in that sense, there is no transformation without radical acceptance. You cannot heal a wound you are still denying. You cannot integrate a part of yourself you still reject. You cannot bloom if you keep condemning your roots. You have to embrace your darkness with the same tenderness with which you embrace your light. You have to stop fighting yourself. And when I speak of acceptance, I don't mean resignation. I mean reconciliation. Looking at your story with compassion, understanding that you did the best you could with what you had, with what you knew, with what you were taught. Understanding that every mechanism that now hurts you was once a strategy to protect you, that every automatic reaction you now want to change was once your only way to survive, and that deserves honor, not shame. Because it is not about judging your past from the consciousness you have now. It is about looking at it with the eyes of the soul and saying, "Thank you. Thank you for keeping me safe. But I don't need to hide anymore. I can finally be who I am." That is the greatest liberation, not when you change everything outside, but when you reunite with yourself. Because from that place, the external world begins to reflect a new energy. Not because you are forcing results, but because your vibration changes. Because you are no longer operating from the wound. You are choosing from healing. And there, without realizing it, you begin to build a life more aligned, more authentic, more you. And that you who emerges after the pain is not the same as before. It is more conscious, more sensitive, deeper. It has passed through the fire of the soul, touched rock bottom, and survived. It has felt so much that now it doesn't need to hear. It can stay, it can hold, it can look straight at even what it once feared. And it's not because it no longer has fear, but because now it has roots, because now it trusts its ability to go through any storm without losing itself. That trust is not arrogance. It is embodied wisdom, a silent certainty that lives within you, that needs no approval, no applause, no permission. The soul knowing it is exactly where it should be, even when it doesn't understand, even when it hurts, even when it feels alone. Because the loneliness that comes after awakening is not punishment. It is cleansing, space, preparation for new connections that are on your energetic level, for bonds where you don't have to hide your scars, nor dim your light, nor pay with your peace. The price of being loved. And that changes everything because you no longer settle, no longer negotiate your worth, no longer accept emotional crumbs, no longer seek love where there is only emptiness. You have understood that you deserve love in its highest form, the love that doesn't hurt, that doesn't crush, that doesn't condition, the love that accompanies without possessing, that supports without controlling, that chooses without needing. And you know that this love begins with you because you are your first home. And as long as you don't live fully within yourself, you will be seeking outside what only you can give yourself. This awakening is not linear. There are setbacks, days when it seems you don't progress, moments when the old version of you tries to come back. And that's okay. It's part of the process. You're not failing, you're integrating, you're clearing memories, you're rewriting your story from a new place. So be patient with yourself, be kind, be compassionate. Treat your soul as you would a child who just woke up from a nightmare, with gentleness, with presence, with unconditional love. And if right now in your life you feel like everything is falling apart, that you're alone, that no one understands you, I want to tell you this. You are not broken. You are opening up. You are not losing. You are freeing yourself. You are not going backward. You are gaining momentum. The dark night of the soul is not the end. It is the threshold. It is the exact point where your old self dies and your true being begins to breathe. Don't be afraid to let go of what no longer vibrates with you. Don't be afraid to close cycles. Don't be afraid to disappoint others if it means being loyal to yourself. Because true success is not fulfilling others' expectations. It is living a life that makes sense to you. A life where you can breathe deeply, look up at the sky, and say, I am here, I am present, I am alive, and I belong to myself. That is the gift Jung's philosophy leaves us. Not the promise of a life without pain, but the possibility of living with depth, of transforming wounds into wisdom, of making the unconscious an ally, of integrating every part of yourself until you feel whole. And from there, from that inner wholeness, begin to create a reality more coherent with your soul. So if you are reading this and you feel a knot in your chest, if your eyes fill with tears for no apparent reason, if something inside you was stirred by these words, listen to it. Don't suppress it, don't silence it, don't rationalize it. That is your soul recognizing itself. That is your spirit saying, finally, someone put it into words. That is you coming back to yourself. And there, in that recognition, a new life begins. A life where you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be radically you, honestly you, lovingly you, because you have nothing left to prove. You owe no one anything. You don't have to ask permission to exist. Now you know that you are your home. You are your guide. You are the medicine you have always been seeking. And from there, everything else begins to align.